Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks. Today we have Siobhan Baillie, British Conservative Party MP for the Conservative Party, Member of Parliament since 2019, a family lawyer, where you started as a councillor and worked an awful deal in charity as well. Welcome to Punchline Talks. Welcome, Siobhan.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you very much. So where are you today? I can see through the glass, it looks like Parliament.
Does it look bomb-proof? It's Parliament. Yeah, I'm in my tiny little office, but I do have a window, so I am winning on that basis.
So how's it going at the moment at Parliament? It must have been a little bit surreal. I saw you the other day standing doing a speech, and Rees-Mogg there, and you were the only person that seemed to be there. Is that the case?
No, so the Parliament, we're operating on a ballot system at the moment. So normally you kind of just get in and jostle and you bob up and down and try and catch the speaker's eye. So when we look like we're trying to do thigh exercises, it's actually an age-old action. But now it's all about a call list. So you bid to speak, and it's a ballot. So we don't always get in, and they're only allowed 50 people in the chamber. So it does look a bit empty. I mean, that chamber's at its best in my view. I know not everyone agrees when everyone's screaming and shouting and sort of and making sure that they're heard and giving support to whoever's speaking. But no, on Jacob Rees-Mogg, I was very grateful to get in. I've spoken twice now about the canals, our fabulous successes in Stroud with the Cotswolds Canal Trust, and also for our transportation industry last week for Lorry Week. So yeah, I still feel amazed that I'm up here, to be honest. It's still a great privilege.
I mean, the Canal Trust, what work they're doing down there really is tremendous, isn't it? It's millions of pounds, especially the roundabout.
Oh yeah, so my home, I'm Frampton-on-Severn, so I go past the roundabout, and I went a couple of weeks ago, and you see that there's water now, and I mean it is a real feat of engineering. But it does remind me that to be kind of a bit more ambitious for things sometimes, because I think, you know, if you look at Ebbly Mill and think that was all filled in, and now it's that beautiful canal site, you know, it does give you kind of a bit of a kick up the backside, all of us, to really sort of keep pushing for projects. So.
I'm very excited about it because I go along Gloucester Canal. I'm a member of the Canal River Trust, by the way. So I'm a big fan. My wife and I, we often walk. I live near the centre of Gloucester. Yeah. So we often walk from Gloucester to Frampton-on-Severn, which is around 8.5 miles, and go to the pub there and have lunch and then get a taxi home. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to the day that we can actually walk from Gloucester all the way to Stroud. I think that's going to be absolutely amazing. So you won the election in 2019. Oh my goodness, you could never imagine. You had a baby in between that. Yep. Global pandemic. Yep. Parliament. Boris, Theresa May. Where would you like to really start? I mean, let's start. Let's start at the very beginning. Let's start about the actual election itself. So yeah.
Well, I think it's always worth reminding people, because I was a candidate for 18 months for Stroud. I stalked Stroud. It was the only seat I wanted to be. I had fought Bermondsey and Old Southwark and came a reliable third. I think if I'd have won that, they'd have all shut up shop at that point. But so I applied for Stroud as the only seat I wanted, and then the candidate for a very long time. But I was in place to fight for 2022, because that's when we were all heading for the election. And in the meantime, I fell pregnant, which was a lovely surprise, and I feel very lucky that I had that, and I've gone on to have my little girl. But I was pregnant during the election at a first trimester. Didn't sort of mention it to anybody, because I wanted the story to be about the election and ideas and my ideas and what I wanted to do for Stroud. But we did not expect Boris to call it at that time. So it was very busy last Christmas. This Christmas will feel very quiet compared to what was going on last year. I know I've really chuffed to win. I mean, as you know, as all your listeners and readers know, you know, David Drew is very popular, long-standing MP, fully expecting to win, and I pipped him and won quite a decent majority as well. So I'm very proud.
Yes, I'm not surprised. I mean, I know David personally as well, and always, you know, seem to have done a great job for Stroud. But you are the winner. You are the incumbent. You know, you're doing the job. What's been the most difficult thing taking over that you've had to, you know, from day one?
Well, it's been a really odd year, because sort of, we were in Parliament, we were sort of won the election on the Friday, was in Parliament by the Sunday, and then you have no staff. So of course David's team don't roll over, so I had to get an office in Stroud, build up a team, and have everything in place, because I immediately wanted to be responding to everybody and making sure that we kind of start the work straight away and hit the ground running, but the apparatus is just not there. So I find that quite difficult to start off with. And then we hit the global pandemic, and of course that sent sort of even the staff I worked at built up, scattering into their own homes, and of course there's just been horrific problems. You know, there's people ringing us that didn't have food in those first few months. I mean, you'll all remember it was absolute, you know, chaos and a lot of fear going on, and the community groups were superb. I mean, absolutely amazing. We're really lucky in Stroud, and everybody pulled together, and whether it was people's on their street or whether it was parish councils or local groups working together. So I think that was pretty tough. But since then, I think the saddest thing for me is that I can't get out and visit, because I'm a bit of a weirdo. I love knocking on doors. People, I just find it. I find, you know, I love politics because it's hopes, dreams, you know, problems and issues that you've got to try and solve. And unfortunately, we have not been able to sort of knock on doors all year. I haven't been able to do the business visits that I would like. I haven't been in schools. You know, I would do that all day long if I could, and that's a shame, because when you look at social media, it's a very mad bubble, often a very angry bubble, and you don't really get the proper sense of people on the doorsteps when they say, you know, I love it when they say, who are you? Why are you here? You know, that's brilliant. That's, you know, complete antipathy towards politics. But also you get the stories, oh, you know, my next door neighbour's just lost their job, or I'm worried about this, or the care home down the road is really struggling. And I have missed that. I have missed that this year.
You mentioned social media, and that brings us very nicely back a few steps to when your daughter was born, and the fact that you were, you know, pregnant, and, you know, after the election it was sort of come out. I can't remember exactly the right terminology or even the right way to say it, but you were given a lot of stick, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was very unfair. How did you deal with that?
Well, it was, I mean, so it started when I announced the pregnancy. Actually, there was sort of people saying I was irresponsible with my timing, and I, you know, partly wanted to laugh, because you're like, you don't know about the fertility of a 40-year-old woman if you think I can time this better. But also, you know, the election was early, and there was an understandable worry, you know, how will we be represented with a woman in charge who's going to have a baby? And but then when the baby was born, the abuse was pretty bad. My team shielded me from quite a lot, but it was just appalling. And it was a suggestion that I was sort of, you know, brand new, I had quite a difficult birth, a suggestion that I should be kind of wheeled out to answer pretty non-urgent questions, just because it was not acceptable to some people. And most people in Stroud are kind. I always make that point, because it, you know, it is a lovely place, but there were some people that were pretty nasty. And I think underlying that is, if you think that a woman in any position, whether it's a business role, whether it's employer or business leader or in politics, you know, can't have a baby, you are basically questioning whether women can be in those roles. And you know, we've got dads that want to take paternity leave, so it's absolutely, if anything I can do, you know, having done all my working all this year with a baby strapped to me basically in Stroud, if that just sends a message out to even one young family that they may want to take up a role and they can still have kids if they so choose, then I think I've done a good job. But no, it's just ridiculous. I mean, people, I will never get why people wake up and think hateful thoughts towards me or anybody else and then decide to put it on social media. I mean, I get called all sorts before breakfast, and I just don't know, it doesn't make sense. Yeah. But
I also don't think that if they saw you face to face, they wouldn't have the guts to do it. A lot of it is cowardice. And the big problem that we have with social media is there's an awful lot of cowards on there. What I don't like are the people who have little pictures of owls or beagles or something, and they're called Frank X2125, and you know, they're quite happy to call you out. They call me out as well, and give us a bit of verbal abuse because they don't agree with things that we have to say or want to say, or and I feel I think there's a big issue moving forward in society that actually I'd like to lobby one of our local MPs that actually would you agree there's a big problem here with social media? So it does need to be, there's freedom of speech, but then there's abuse and racism and, lots of other problems.
Yeah, I think you made a good point. I mean, some of my biggest antagonists on and aggressive people online. When I see them in town, they're very polite, and that's a bit strange. But I am moving towards the fact that I think we might need to remove the ability to be anonymous online when for social media. And I never thought I would say that, but I actually think there does need to be a bit of shift. And it's the question I'm asked most in schools for secondary. How do you deal with the abuse? What do you do with it? And unfortunately, the way I've learned to deal with it is to remove engagement. And I used to love going backwards and forwards. I love being challenged. I wouldn't do this job if I wasn't somebody that wants to be challenged on my views and my opinion. But unfortunately, those platforms are just not designed now to have a spirited or useful or constructive conversation. It's just a pile on. So unfortunately, I don't tend to spend any time engaging on Twitter at all, and I've reduced the engagement on Facebook. But what I do is I contact people on direct message. So if anyone's asking me a legitimate question, I try and contact them on DMs and get them to email me. So yeah, I am looking and I am watching and I am listening, and I absorb any. I'm going to get things wrong. Everyone gets things wrong, and I welcome being told that. But the abuse is unnecessary, and it's going to put people off. It's going to put people off going into any public life.
Do you think also that people, the media itself, sometimes they don't follow the news? I'm talking about the national news here. They're actually wanting more people's opinions rather than and we've all got an opinion. We're not all going to agree, and therefore the narrative is about people's opinion. Rather than the actual news. Do you think there's a part of that to play as well?
Yeah, and I think people are fascinated by, you follow the people you're interested in their views, or even people that annoy you and you want to kind of see what they're up to. But yeah, I would say most points are opinion pieces rather than fact. And I think the ability to have critical thinking and sort of analyze what you're reading is tough for anybody because it all happens so fast. But yeah, I think we could all do with taking a bit of a breath and taking stock. I mean, I have to say, Mark, your punchline, it's fantastic because it's, this is happening over here, this is what the business has to say about it, and you get the kind of you get the business lead or the main stories that we can then follow on. I do find that really useful, and I think championing local businesses and local issues. One of the things, sorry, I'm going on and on, but one of the things I found knocking on doors through the Brexit stuff is people just turning off the news. And actually, when I speak to people in supermarkets in Stroud now, so I always say, how are you doing? How are you getting on? And it's pretty difficult. It's pretty miserable, and people are starting to turn off the news with the COVID because there's so much confusion about what to follow. So I don't think it's helpful. I think we got some stats though. So for example, there's about 16% of the electorate's on Twitter. So it's not everyone, and we've got to remember that. And most people are kind, as I've said. Most people are interested in facts and interested in what's happening in their local areas, and not interested in pulling everybody down. So
I think the aggressiveness of some of the interviews during the Prime Minister's question time, as well as some of the scientists, and you have the national media. I hate to say it, Sky, BBC, they were too aggressive, and actually it turned off a lot of the viewers. I think we'd all had enough by then, which is a real shame because of some of the core messages got lost, and I think this is a big problem moving forward. How do you tell everybody what's going to be told? I think, personally speaking, I think the government has done an amazing job in some aspects. So yes, there are, of course, there's problems, but anyway, so you like talking to people, you like meeting people, so this is your worst possible outcome. I like knocking on doors as well, by the way. I used to sell the citizen door to door. So I've been all over the city, all over the county doing that. And I'm very fortunate. One of the parts, and thank you, by the way, the kind things you said about Punchline, is that we do go around and deliver the magazine all over the county. So I'm fortunate to walk into people's businesses and talk to not as many people as possible.
Yeah.
You could come into living with me sometime.
I'm very good at that. So I'm not good at much, but I am good at that. So that's yeah. No, I think it's right, and I'm fundamentally nosy. I mean, that's why it's perfect, because it's actually you will never learn enough about a place unless you've walked down every nook and cranny and down long driveways and sort of talk to people that live down there. It is it is a weird hobby, but it is a very privileged one. So.
Did you always want to be a politician when you were younger?
No, I first started out, I wanted to be a prima ballerina, and then I wanted to be a nun for a while, because I was at a Catholic school and I liked Sister Matthew. No, I think I went into law very young, so I was only about 17, and I was a secretary, and then I worked my way up, which is some people may already know. And I really loved my job as a family lawyer, and I became a solicitor. And it's problem solving for people's lives. I mean, these are at the most difficult times. But what I kind of discovered that there was so much wrong with the legislation. We've got sort of 1970s legislation, 1980s legislation doesn't really fit with modern families, blended families. And I started sort of asking a lot of questions about how we could make changes. And it's quite obvious that there needs to be changes in this place, in Parliament, for the legislation. And then you start, and in politics, if you make eye contact with the wrong person, you end up delivering leaflets, and very quickly you're making an application to stand. And and they're very, very supportive, and locally our local association are fantastic. So I think it's actually a perfect job for me. I can see all the different things I've done over the years kind of point towards doing this job. The legislative part, the sort of the more social work aspects and the problem solving aspects and the kind of community work. It's all things I've done in other roles. So.
I mean, nowadays, normally I'd ask you questions about transportation, about, business rights. I mean, with COVID, your inbox must be full of people who are struggling, full of businesses who are struggling. What's the key element? What's the one thing itself that keeps coming on your doorstep at the moment?
This second lockdown's been quite interesting, because as I said, the last time there was a panic. So we saw it with the supermarkets with food, and there was very much sort of and then when the regulations and the rules were coming out, there was a question mark. Even can I go to my allotment? Am I allowed to go to work? For this lockdown, it's been a lot calmer. We're still getting extensive amount of emails and questions, but it's very much more about businesses and accessing the finance schemes and asking questions about what might happen next, and many more people who are questioning the usefulness of lockdowns, questioning whether there's another way, and thinking about things like testing and vaccines. So it's changed all year, but my kind of focus is particularly on I've just been going through it, my massive briefing on all the tiers that were coming out. So we've got to really think through sort of how do we get as many businesses open safely as possible. And I think frustration for Stroud and across the valleys and Vale is that so many of our businesses had worked so hard to get COVID safe, and were succeeding in that, and we were in tier 1. Cases were ticking up, granted, and I don't dismiss that, but I want to get back to the point where people have confidence that they can go out and use our local businesses, and so that's why I was just going through all the new guidance for, and we won't know until later this week what tier we're going to be in. So.
Well, I was going to say the big problem, really, I feel so sorry for business. I'm lucky I can work from home. All my colleagues are all working from home, and it's pretty much business as usual for us to get Punchline. Okay, the Moose side of things to adapt. But I feel for the poor hairdressers, all these different people that spent an absolute fortune. They might have got those business grants, but they are grants. They have to pay them back sometime. And they might have bought the PPE and the shields and got their staff trained and their hand sanitizer and this and that and that. And then to be told, actually, you can't trade anymore. So do you agree with, I think it was Mark Harper recently wrote a letter, didn't he, to Boris, I believe. Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown was on the television last night saying about opening tiers. Are you in that camp as well?
Yeah, and just at one point though, where there were business grants, the businesses won't need to pay those back. So where the businesses for grants, when it's
So the
for
loans.
rates, yeah. So I mean, for Stroud, we got like 26 million quid, and they were distributed, and we're just about to go through another round of those, plus a discretionary round. So they won't be paid back. But you're completely right. It's the stop-start nature of this, and people like the wedding industry. I mean, they just got decimated because their bookings. That's one of the most beautiful estates, you know, they've gone down like 90%. Those bookings go to next year, so they're not winning new business, and it goes on. But in terms of your question about where I am, I mean, I did not want to go into a lockdown, but the medics and the science, I took a view that I think it was the most sensible way forward, and especially when you saw people like France and all the other countries had gone and taken that measure. I did that only on the basis that I'd received assurances from the Prime Minister that we'd be coming back out to the tiered regional system, because I think that that is most appropriate for us in Gloucestershire. I am supportive of this approach. I would like to see us in tier 1. I'm concerned that depending on the numbers, because we won't get the data until later this week, and the criteria, I'm concerned that quite a lot of the country will go into immediate tier 2, and then we'll be having arguments about coming back down. But it'd be much easier once there is a formula, so we know that, you know, if you can get cases in Stroud, in Gloucestershire, down to X, then we'll be back into tier 1. But no, you're right. I mean, it's been an absolutely devastating year, and you know, pubs like, so for example, the Badger in Eastington, they did amazing work sending out meals during the first lockdown and COVID, and I think they've adapted. And I know a resident was telling me recently, the Bell in Selsey, I haven't been out there, they've gone doing fish and chips. You know, people have really kind of bent themselves, but it's still no way near what they can usually do. Yeah, so it's tough.
Some of the creativeness has been wonderful, and people setting up their own businesses, you know, from doing general crafts, making cards to their family and friends, and they've turned them into businesses. I know a really good friend of mine, his wife now makes face masks, and he actually he's a graphic designer, and he was telling me he spends at least one day a week boxing up her face mask, you know, on and helping her out like that. So I said, you better be careful, mate. She'll be taking over.
But I mean, it's probably a good business actually, because I don't see face masks going for a while. But I think one of the things that has struck me is, and it's been for the last few years, sort of working in and around Stroud, is the civil society aspect. And as we learn, you know, we are going to be in a very, very difficult economic position. We know that the jobs, I mean, the claimant count's going up, but that doesn't necessarily mean unemployment. But we know there will be unemployment, particularly when furlough ends. You know, I think we should be looking to our other businesses and to our volunteering schemes, like the canals, like our colleges, and see, you know, where can people go and learn new skills? Where can people make sure they've got somewhere to get up and go out, and not, you know, not have the awful situation where they've got nowhere to go and nothing to do, because it's all there for the taking. But I often can knock on a door in one bit of Pagan Hill and meet somebody that doesn't know about the Pagan Hill Community Cafe, for example. And I think that kind of mapping and networking, I think that's something that I would like to take on actually in the new year, and something that we can get civil society and the volunteer sector working better with businesses, because we've seen how much everybody has worked together and done really well. And I know local businesses are taking on things like they're taking on Kickstart apprentices, and so there's going to be a lot of crossover going into the new year.
I mean, I totally agree. And I'd just like to say, actually, while I've got you, I think Stroud District Council and all the councils have actually done an amazing job.
Yeah.
To help the most vulnerable. The business community have really rallied out. It's almost like Second World War-ish.
Yeah.
And the way that people have rallied. I think we just got to keep doing that, really, and keep working together. I quite like Boris's his, you know, we can have a jolly Christmas as long as we're all jolly careful.
Be careful, yeah.
Very Boris.
It's very Boris. No, I think that's right. I think there's. I mean, I think most people take personal responsibility very seriously, and I think that's the way forward. We know the risk, we know the basics, the distancing, the washing the hands, the indoors. We know that over the winter is going to be particularly important. But no, I mean, going forward, I do feel that our business communities, our local councils, our local residents, there's been this gelling that I would love to see continue, and very much, you know, if there will be limited travel, if people are not going into London or into Bristol to work, if they're at home more, we'll see market towns thrive. You know, we're already seeing upticks of that, and during lockdown people are actually buying local a little bit more. And I mean, I love the schemes in Stroud. You got the Totally Locally Fiver Fest, and they do amazing. The Chamber of Commerce and Tony, yeah, brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's when chips are down, you find new ways through. So, and I think we've definitely seen that this year.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So that brings me actually round to your colleagues and your other 5 colleagues, other MPs in the city, in the county. How do you all work together? Do you meet in the bar at the end of the day and
no? So
how does it work?
Well, we're actually, so I was on maternity leave, and so we have weekly calls, usually. So either we're meeting with the NHS leads, the county council, or Sir Geoffrey and I meet with Stroud District Council because they're our patch. So we're always, like today we were on a call with about the A417. So we have these constant meetings, and then we have a WhatsApp group, which is how every modern family exists now. And so we can agree or disagree on there. But we try our best to, you know, come to shared platforms on things, because I think it's often useful, particularly with COVID, where simple messaging is helpful. And we're usually as one, and where we're not, then, you know, we'll go off in our different ways. And but no, I feel really they're fantastic. I mean, it's a novelty because Stroud's never had a female MP before, so I'm still a bit of a novelty. And I know when they came canvassing with me, they couldn't quite work out what I was trying to change my shoes and sort my hair out and do all the girl things, because they'd never had to deal with that before. But no, they've all been very welcoming, and yeah, different experiences in different parts of the county, as you know.
Yeah, going to a different subject now very quickly. Brexit, EU, it all looks, I don't know where you stand on Brexit, whether you were in or out, or whether you were on the fence. Which way you were?
Yeah, I wasn't on the fence. I campaigned to remain, but when I lost. I was very much like, okay, we need to get on with it. In fact, I remember I made that case. You know, if we lose, then this is it. I was making that case. Please vote Remain, because if we lose, this is it. We're off out. And we lost. And so after that, I was kind of taking much more of a practical view and get on with it.
And how do you think we'll get a deal?
Yeah, I do. And I feel like what we've learned from watching the EU and the negotiations, because most people did not have, you know, eyeballs on the EU as much as we have in the last few years, but the deals seem to come very late in the day. And I understand from sort of reading newspapers, so no amazing insights, you know, there's already discussions about how they can kind of extend time and give more options. And I've got real faith in David Frost. I think he is handling things really well. I like his communication routes. He uses Twitter well. He gives us all updates after, I mean the public, not just MPs. He'd be very, you know, he's very open to meetings. So, you know, we know the sticking points. I think it's ridiculous that we are still having these conversations, because the EU knew where we were on things like fishing and the state aid and things like that. So there needs to be give and take from both sides to get this deal done. I mean, one thing, so as a family lawyer, a mediator once told me that you can have everything else agreed between a husband and a wife, or a wife and wife, you know, the partnership, everything can be agreed about one last thing. And the mediator called it the last cookie in the cookie jar. And then they can spend thousands of pounds having this like absolute humdinger of a fight over that one last thing, and bit of fear of freedom, bit of kind of it's the last thing, the most important thing to deal with, and I think that's kind of where we are at the moment. So the last cookie in the cookie jar.
People spend a fortune fighting over dogs and cats and pets, don't they? It's all about a final bit of control. Funny enough, a local law firm has just bought out what do you call it, a new brief or something to do the bit with the pets. But anyway, that's aside. How would you like to be remembered, Siobhan? What would you like to achieve for Stroud? If there's one thing that you'd say, okay, this was my time,
Yeah, I'd like to breathe life into further education, and really kind of get youngsters in the area knowing that university is not the only option, doesn't have to be. And we've got a fantastic college in SGS. I was talking to the chief exec the other day, and I think from our youngsters and everyone in Stroud knowing that they can live, work and be in the area and be successful in the area, then I think great things will come, because and also, our green tech, I'd love to see that fly. I mean, some of the innovation companies that we have locally are absolutely fantastic. But I mean, I want to be known as someone that's optimistic and gets stuck in, and even the projects that are kind of 20 years and haven't had much progress, like the Stroud Water Station, Bristol Road, things like Tricorn House. Love to do something to Tricorn House, but that there's some very long-standing projects, and I kind of want to come at it with quite a lot of energy and optimism, because it's just such a fantastic area. And
it's absolutely beautiful as well. I mean, I must admit, I love going to Stroud and Nailsworth and all those sorts of places. I've got a few questions to ask you as well, if that's okay. The first one, it's a little bit off pattern, okay? What's your favourite film?
Oh, my favourite film. It's a film called Stardust. It's a bit of a fantasy film. So it was written by the book was written by Neil Gaiman. So it's complete escapism. I like anything where trees start to talk or animals start to have arguments. I think that is, yeah.
What's the last book that you wrote? You not wrote, but you read, sorry.
Yeah, so that's a good. I have hardly read any books this year. The book I'm reading at the moment is all about Edmund Burke, which doesn't say much for my social life, really. Yeah.
Who's Edmund Burke? I'm sorry to show my
politician. So wonderful. But I think what I try and do is read magazines. So that's my absolute downtime, is to try and read Grazia every fortnight and get into that. But I'm hardly reading anymore.
Just a shame we don't have Punchline. I'm terrible as well. I don't read books, really. I don't have time. I read newspapers.
My husband's brilliant. He reads the Booker Prize list, the long list, every year. Like he's just really good at sitting down and doing that. Whereas I'm trying to always do something else and try and sort of go down my list. But yeah.
Yeah, it made me my kind of clients as well. But my latest magazine, would you believe, I'm working my way up. Here is Tyre Weekly. I think it's called. Tyre Monthly.
That sounds like something like at the end of Have I Got News for You?
It is a little bit like that. Top 3 business tips. Okay, what is the top 3 business tips that you could give some entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I would say, I was thinking is apply. Actually just get started. I think one of the things I try and talk to youngsters about is what we're so lucky here, just in this day and age, is that you can have an idea, you can do a bit of research online, know who your competitors are or who your friends are, and then get on with it. And I would just say, just get started, because you can talk yourself out of 100 different things, and it's better. And I think the second thing would be to contact the local investment support teams. I've been amazed how few people know about the G1st LEP, and that's not fair to them, because they do an incredible amount of work, incredible amount of outreach, but particularly during COVID, there's loads of small businesses that didn't feel that there was any support out there, and there's things like the British Business Bank. We've put absolutely millions and millions into startup loans, so to look out for the investment. I think the last thing would be is just to promote, and I think one of the growth areas for Stroud in particular is going to be tourism, and part of it being part of us being a great area to come and visit is the story that we have about all the innovation, whether it's green fuels or electroflight or whatever's going on here. I think that builds into the story. So I would say promote and use all the platforms that are available, and people like Punchline, and get hold of your MPs and get us to talk up what you're doing in Parliament if we can.
Siobhan, really nice to talk to you. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today, and hopefully we can talk to you very soon. So thank you very much for your time, and talk to you very soon. That's Punchline Talks with Siobhan.